Before you cut them off forever, the checkpoint is stopping you here, not to tell you to stay, not to tell you to forgive, not to tell you to call them back. The checkpoint is stopping you because of one specific thing. Most of the people who cut someone off forever do not regret the silence. They regret the speed. They regret that the verdict was issued in 3 weeks of resentment, 3 days of clarity, and 3 minutes of texting. They regret that what they called a boundary was actually a funeral nobody else got invited to. The checkpoint is going to inspect this in the next 20 minutes. By the end of this video, you will know the 6 false reasons people cut someone off forever. You will know the difference between a boundary, a pause, and a verdict. And the channel has never heard a single creator explain these 3 as separate things. And you will know the one question to ask alone in a quiet room before the cut becomes the kind of cut you cannot uncut. The checkpoint is not on the side of the cut. The checkpoint is not on the side of the relationship. The checkpoint is on the side of the version of you who has to live with the decision for the next 20 years. Before the checkpoint inspects the 6 false reasons, one thing has to be named clearly. You are making this decision inside a specific cultural moment. In 2026, an estimated 38% of adults in the United States are estranged from at least one immediate family member. The major newspapers are calling it an epidemic. Therapists are calling it a movement. The platforms are calling it self-care. The checkpoint will say this without taking a side. The checkpoint has watched many people leave dangerous people. That work was right. That work saved their lives. The checkpoint has also watched many people leave inconvenient people. That work was different. That work was a permanent verdict issued during a temporary feeling. Both of those things are happening at the same time, right now, inside the same hashtag, inside the same therapy language, inside the same 10-second videos. So before you treat your own situation as the obvious case, the checkpoint is asking you to do one thing. Step out of the cultural air for the next 20 minutes. Pretend just for the length of this video that you do not yet know whether your cutoff is the right one or the wrong one. That is the only stance from which the checkpoint can actually be useful. Most people never notice this. The checkpoint has seen 6 false reasons people use to cut someone off forever. Each one looks like the real reason in the moment. Each one was already in the room long before the cut. Each one fails the same test 6 months later. The checkpoint will name all 6. False reason 1. The last argument. This is the cutoff that arrives at the end of a fight that was supposed to be small. They said the thing. You said the thing back. The room got too hot. And in the heat, the sentence formed itself. That is the last time I let you do that to me. The checkpoint will not argue that the thing they did was small. Maybe it was not small. Maybe it was the latest version of a thing they have been doing for years. But notice the architecture. You did not decide to cut them off because of a careful private inventory taken in a quiet room. You decided to cut them off because the body was flooded, the chest was tight, and the verdict felt the most relieving thing in the room. The checkpoint has seen this exact verdict revisited many times, 6 and 12 and 24 months later, and the same sentence keeps appearing in the journal entry. I meant the cut. I just didn't mean it for forever. The last argument cutoff is real, but forever is the wrong unit. Forever is what the body grabbed for because the body needed the heat to drop. False reason 2. The therapy vocabulary. This is the cutoff that arrives because you finally learned the words. Narcissist, avoidant, emotionally immature, enmeshed, toxic, codependent, high conflict, disorganized attachment. The checkpoint is not going to argue that these words are useless. Some of them are precise. Some of them name a real pattern. But the checkpoint has watched a specific thing happen when a person first learns this vocabulary. They go back through their entire history and relabel every confusing moment. Suddenly, every disappointment from their parent is a wound. Every awkward silence from their friend is a violation. Every misalignment with their partner is a pattern. The vocabulary feels like clarity. It is not always clarity. Sometimes it is just a new lens. And a new lens used on an old life can produce a verdict that was not actually warranted by the old life. The checkpoint will say this carefully. There is a difference between learning a word for what was happening to you and using a word to confirm a cutoff you already wanted permission to issue. The therapy vocabulary cutoff fails the same way every time. 3 years later, you read different books, you meet different therapists, you grow into a different version of yourself, and the labels you used to issue the cut no longer sit cleanly on the people you use them on. The relationship is gone, the label is gone, and you are left in a room with neither. False reason 3. The social media verdict. This is the cutoff that arrives the morning after the algorithm shows you a 10-second video that names exactly what is wrong with them. The video had 200,000 comments. Every single comment was a person describing your parent, your sibling, your friend, your partner, your former best friend. You watched 11 of those videos that night. You did not watch 11 videos defending the other person because the algorithm does not serve those videos to people in your emotional state. By morning, the verdict felt like consensus. The checkpoint will tell you what consensus actually was. Consensus was a feedback loop run by a recommendation engine that knew you were upset. Consensus was not a jury. It was a mirror that only showed you the part of the room that confirmed your interior weather. The checkpoint has seen this exact loop break people apart in 2026 with a speed that did not exist 20 years ago. The platform did not invent the friction. The friction was already there. But the platform built a frame around it that made the friction feel like proof. The social media verdict cutoff fails in a very particular way. You delete the apps for a month. The mirror stops feeding the loop, and the verdict you were holding does not look as clean as it did at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. False reason 4. The identity construction. This is the cutoff that arrives because you have started becoming someone, and the people you came from no longer fit the version of you that you are auditioning for. The checkpoint will not pretend this is not real. People do outgrow rooms. Real lives do require the doors to start closing on certain weather. But the identity construction cutoff is not always about outgrowing. Sometimes it is about performing. Sometimes the cut happens not because they are stopping you from becoming yourself, but because keeping them in the frame would complicate the story you are telling about yourself. The checkpoint has watched this happen at a very specific life stage, late 20s to mid 30s. The version of you that is finally arriving has no place for the version of them that knew you when you were unfinished. So the cut gets issued in the language of growth. I have outgrown them. They cannot meet me where I am. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes it is half true. Sometimes it is the language a person uses for the people who would, if invited back into the room, accidentally show new people who you used to be. The identity construction cutoff fails the same way every time. The story you were telling about yourself changes around year 5. You become more comfortable with the unfinished version of you. And then the people you cut for knowing the unfinished version of you are gone. And what they were holding on your behalf is gone with them. False reason 5. The preemptive funeral. This is the cutoff the checkpoint sees most often, and the one almost no one names out loud. The preemptive funeral is the cutoff you issue because you are afraid that one day they are going to leave, get sick, change, fade, or die. And you would rather be the one who walked out first. The checkpoint will say this with full care. The body that is doing this is not a coward. It is a body that has been left before and is trying, with whatever tools it has, to never be left again. So it leaves first. And it calls the leaving a boundary. The preemptive funeral cutoff is the one most likely to be called health by friends, self-protection by therapists, and closure by the person doing it. The checkpoint has watched this cutoff become permanent and then 10 years later become the single largest source of midnight rumination in a person's life. Because the person they were trying to leave before being left did not actually leave. The person was simply complicated, imperfect, slow to repair, reachable if reached for. And the cutoff did not protect from grief. The cutoff replaced one grief with a different, longer, less acknowledged one. The grief of having chosen the silence before the silence chose you. False reason 6. The borrowed cutoff. This is the cutoff that is not actually yours. Your partner does not get along with them. Your new community thinks they sound toxic. Your therapist has implied they are not a safe relationship. Your friends have been telling you for years they were no good, so you cut them off. The checkpoint will say this directly. Sometimes the chorus is correct. Sometimes the people around you can see what you cannot. That kind of borrowed clarity has saved real lives. But sometimes the chorus is just loud. The borrowed cutoff is the one that produces the strangest aftermath. The person doing it does not actually feel the relief they expected because the cut was negotiated in someone else's body. The checkpoint has watched this fail in a specific way. The relationship that the borrowed cutoff ended was a relationship you would not have ended on your own. And the chorus that helped you end it does not stay loud forever. The therapist stops being your therapist. The partner becomes an ex. The friends drift. And what is left is a silence you signed for in a borrowed pen. But here is the deeper issue: 6 false reasons. The checkpoint has now inspected each one. Notice the pattern. The last argument cutoff was issued during temperature. The therapy vocabulary cutoff was issued during a relabeling. The social media verdict cutoff was issued during an algorithm loop. The identity construction cutoff was issued during a self-audition. The preemptive funeral cutoff was issued during a fear of being left. The borrowed cutoff was issued during someone else's certainty. Each one of these is a state, not a settled position, a state. And the rule the checkpoint is asking you to consider before the cut becomes the kind of cut you cannot uncut is this: you can issue a pause during a state. You cannot issue a verdict during a state. The checkpoint is going to give you a working distinction the channel has not given before. There are 3 different things people are calling the same word: a boundary, a pause, a verdict. They sound related. They are not the same. A boundary is a line you communicate to the other person about what you will and will not be in the room for. If this keeps happening, I am going to step out of the conversation for the evening. That is a boundary. It is announced. It is conditional. It is reversible. A pause is a withdrawal of contact for a defined period of time so the body can settle, the situation can develop, and the next decision can be made from a quieter inner room. I am not going to speak to you for 90 days while I figure out what I actually want here. That is a pause. It has a clock. It has an end date. It is not a verdict. A verdict is the cutoff. It is the no contact for forever. It is the door closed and the lock changed. I am never going to speak to you again. That is a verdict. It is total. It is unannounced in its full finality. It is intended to be irreversible. The checkpoint has watched the vast majority of broken cutoffs in 2026 happen because people skipped the second category entirely. They go straight from boundary to verdict with nothing in between. They use the word boundary to do the work of a verdict. They use the word no contact to do the work of forever. And the body, 6 months later, does not know whether it is paused or sentenced. The pause is the missing tool. The pause is the thing that lets you find out whether the state was a state or whether it was a settled position before the door becomes the kind of door you cannot reopen. I issued a verdict once that should have been a pause. I called it boundaries. It was not boundaries. It was the only way I had at the time to make the chest stop hurting. I got the chest to stop hurting. I also got a silence in my life that I am still inspecting 8 years later. The checkpoint did not always sit on this side of the line. There was a door the checkpoint shut that did not need to be shut for forever. The checkpoint has not opened that door. The checkpoint is not sure the door can still be opened. That is what a verdict issued during a state actually costs. Not always the relationship. Sometimes only the option. The checkpoint will tell you something about forever that almost no one in the cutoff conversation says directly. Forever is a very long time. The person you are cutting off in 2026 is not the only version of them you are cutting off. You are also cutting off the version of them in 2032, in 2041, in 2058, the version they have not become yet. The version they would have become if you had stayed reachable. The version they will become without you. You are also cutting off every funeral you would have shown up to, every grandchild they might have held, every late life call where the years had softened them into someone you would have recognized. The checkpoint is not saying you owe any of those future versions of them anything. Sometimes you do not. Sometimes the cost of staying reachable is too high to ask the present you to carry. The checkpoint is only saying this: forever is not the unit you think it is when you are signing for it in a hot week in May. Forever is every Tuesday for the rest of your life. Make sure the cut you are issuing was actually issued at the scale of every Tuesday for the rest of your life, and not at the scale of the worst Tuesday you have had this month. So here is the question. The checkpoint is asking you to ask before the cut becomes permanent. It is one question. It is short. The shortness is not a shortcut. It is the shape of the question that can actually decide this. Sit somewhere quiet, phone off, no music, no second person in the room, just you and a piece of paper and a pen. At the top of the paper, write the name of the person you are about to cut off. Below the name, write the date that is exactly 1 year from today. Then write this sentence in the present tense, as if it is already happening. On this date, 1 year from now, I am living a life with no contact from this person, and I am the version of myself I want to be. Now read that sentence 3 times. The checkpoint is not asking you whether the sentence is true. The checkpoint is asking you a much harder question. Can you tell right now whether that sentence is true because the cut is right, or because the cut feels relieving in the temperature you are in this week? If you cannot tell the difference, you do not have a verdict. You have a state. If you have a state, you do not issue a verdict. You issue a pause. The pause is 90 days. During the 90 days, no contact, no scrolling their profile, no checking on them through mutual friends, no rehearsing the speech you would give them if they reached out. On day 91, you come back to the paper. You read the sentence again. You ask the same question. If the sentence still reads the same way, clean, settled, not relieving, then on day 92 you may issue the verdict, and you will issue it, knowing the verdict was not made by a state. If the sentence has shifted, even slightly, if the body is now uncertain, if the chest is now softer, if the question now has more texture than it did 90 days ago, then the verdict was not yet decision grade. You do not have to choose the verdict. You do not have to choose the relationship. You can extend the pause another 90 days. The pause was always the tool the cutoff conversation forgot to give you. That is the practice. The checkpoint owes one clarity before the close. If the person you are about to cut off has been physically violent, sexually violent, or has put your safety or the safety of a child you protect at real risk, this video is not for you. The pause is not the right tool for that situation. The pause was built for relationships where the question is this still worth carrying? Not for relationships where the question is, am I safe? If you are safe but tired, this video is for you. If you are safe but resentful, this video is for you. If you are safe but performing growth, this video is for you. If you are not safe, the checkpoint is asking you to seek the help of the people in your life and the systems in your community who specialize in that exact question. The pause is not built for the safety question. The pause is built for the should this be forever question. The checkpoint has noticed that the 90-day pause is hard to hold inside a phone that is constantly inviting you to relitigate the verdict in your head. Drift inward is the small, private room, the checkpoint built for the kind of question this video is asking. A place to write the sentence, set the date 90 days from now, and reread the same paragraph every Sunday morning without an algorithm reaching over your shoulder to vote for the cut. It is not a therapist. It is not the chorus. It is a quiet desk in a loud sanctuary, designed to keep the pause intact long enough for the verdict to either earn itself or dissolve itself. The ruling. A boundary is a line. A pause is a clock. A verdict is forever. Do not let a state in your chest sign for a forever you are going to live with on every Tuesday for the rest of your life. Issue the pause. Let the 90 days decide whether the verdict was real